This is so annoying. It's not even hitting now. Oh, we got some movement. Got some movement. All right, looks like we're back. There's been some, again, I am in terrible Wi-Fi mode, and whatever the Wi-Fi does is what I am allowed to do. So if the Wi-Fi keeps shutting off on me, then I have to deal with the Wi-Fi that we have. This is the world that we live in. I'm in a radio station, Matt. I'm in a radio station, and Wi-Fi doesn't work. I don't fully understand how that works out, that a radio station doesn't have something that works well. Kind of drives me nuts that I have to start and stop this. But where were we? We were on Francisco Lindor. Right. Oh, you think that only one guy? We're probably only one premier player coming to the Dodgers next year.
And I think that's sort of best case scenario. I mean, the Dodgers don't necessarily have. Friedman has developed a reputation of not making, and it's not fair,
right?
Because we've touched on his big trades and stuff like that. But there's definitely a stigma that he won't go after the superstar, that he bargain hunts and this and that. That being said, I think it's not completely unreasonable to expect or believe that they would get one sort of premier player. Now, where the question comes down to me is that going to be free agency or on the trade market? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be interesting to see play out. Will Friedman prefer to spend, or is he going to tap into some of the process that they still kind of have?
Right, and I think that's something that we're now at a point where the Dodgers are, and I think Andrew Friedman understands that he's at this point too, is that we are now at a point where all of your young guys that you've been waiting that need to come up have all kind of gotten here. Gavin Lux, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, Corey Seager, Cody Bellinger, Will Smith, they're all up already. All these guys are up and ready to go. There are still a bunch of prospects in the minor leagues that are still they're still a top 5, top 10 minor league system without all of these guys. So there's still guys available, but you have to understand that you got everyone up now. You've been to 2 World Series and went out in 5 to a team that really should have beaten right away. And I don't want to talk about the postseason yet. I'm not. It hurts my heart, but I think we're at a point now where it's like, all right, these prospects that you're holding on to, now is the time. Last year, I understood it. Gavin Lux was a guy that you didn't want to move Gavin Lux and Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin and Will Smith and Keeper Ruiz and all these guys for one player and a relief pitcher made 0 sense to me. I'm glad they didn't do it. And he turned out to be a pedophile. So who made the right decision? Let's be honest. Yeah. But now you have guys in this minor league system that probably are cut off. From the major league team. You have your young core team that's all below 30 years old. Now is the time to start moving these players for guys. And so I think this is what Dodger fans are really interested in when it comes to Francisco Lindor or Garrett Cole or Anthony Rendon or Steven Strasburg. You want to sign the best players or trade for the best players, but will the Dodgers actually do it? And will Andrew Friedman do it? I think now is the time to do it. And another name you're going to see a bunch, and I think I saw it in the chat at some point too, is Mookie Betts. Yeah. Mookie Betts is another guy that I think people are really excited about and kind of moving away from being in Boston. I mean, that's going to take a lot too. Those are 2 guys, Lindor and Betts. You can't get both, right?
Probably not. I don't. Yeah. I mean, if you do, then you're gutting your farm system at that point, which Friedman will not.
No,
I don't see happening. Also, with the Red Sox, you have a new front office in place, so they're going to be, I think, extremely cautious with any sort of major trade like that, because if a new regime that possibly gets off on the wrong foot, that's in Boston, that's not going to go well.
Boston will.
I mean, look at what they did to Dave Dombrowski. He just won them World Series and then he was fired.
It's because it's all about the wins. So that's why the same thing that we talk about with Andrew Friedman is Dave Dombrowski. Like, he won a title just last year and they got rid of him, and the Dodgers are keeping Andrew Friedman. But the difference is that you're seeing 2 totally different teams where Red Sox go for it all the time and they win, and they've won now 3 World Series in this what is this now, century, in this millennium, whatever you want to call it. They've won 3 since 2004. So you have that, whereas the Dodgers have won nothing, but they've gone to the World Series twice, and they've won 7 years in a row, and they have a top 5 farm system, and they have one of the best teams in all of baseball, but no World Series rings.
Right.
Which would you rather have?
Probably the World Series.
Yeah,
rings.
the World Series. So that's why. So what's happening with, they brought in what's his name? He was from
Tampa Bay.
From Tampa Bay, yeah, he's the Jewish guy like me, Chaim Bloom. Yeah. So yeah, like they are willing to. That's going more analytical.
Yeah.
So even though they were already in that realm, they're going more analytical. But so maybe that is why Mookie Betts gets moved, because they want to. Bloom wants to put his stamp on that team and you're going to get a lot for him. Like, what would you think the Dodgers would give up for Mookie Betts? He's an outfielder, so you have to remember that means that Bellinger and Pollock, which I know that's a dirty word for the most part, but Pollock is one of those guys, and Jock Peterson and whoever else that Alex Verdugo's coming back.
Right.
Edwin Rios was up for a little bit. Right. I know Chris Taylor, Kike Hernandez. We have a bunch of players that can actually play outfield.
And more in the minors.
DJ Peters is another guy in the outfield that's blocked. So I don't know. What do you think a move for Mookie Betts looks like?
Oh, man, it's starting with. I mean,
we're just speculating.
If you bring up the top prospects list, so we're gonna be. If you're the Dodgers, you're starting probably with Akibert Ruiz. And if I'm the Red Sox, I'm asking for one of May or Gonsolin or Josiah Gray. Yeah. I mean, the Red Sox could literally take the Dodgers farm system and say, I want your top catcher, I want your top position player, I want your top pitcher, and that would be kind of the starting point. You obviously start high and then settle in somewhere.
Of course.
But that would be a significant trade, and I'm sure there's then also one or two major league pieces that are then going.
Yeah. Well, one of the guys, we were talking about it a little bit before, Edwin Rios, who was on the Major League club, had a lot of power, was a big bat, is another guy that could possibly move to the American League and be a DH immediately.
Right.
And actually fits right into the DH system that they have over there, which, by the way, I'm very anti-DH.
Good, me too.
I hate the DH.
National League plays real baseball.
Yeah, it is real baseball. You play both positions. You play offense and defense.
Yeah.
You don't get to just choose one and not play the other one.
But you know the DH is coming, right?
I know. Why are gonna make me feel bad?
Sorry.
Lakers won yesterday. But yeah, like I know it's coming, but it's the worst thing because your guys are getting paid, and I know we're going way off topic here, but guys are getting paid $13, $14, $15, $17 million to sit on the bench, stand up, swing a bat 3 times, go sit back down, and they're done.
I will say there is an art to being a talented designated hitter.
I mean,
a little bit.
Yeah, you hone in on your batting skills. You don't play any out.
Hitting a baseball, I think, is one of the hardest.
Absolutely.
Achievement, skills, whatever you want to call it, talents.
Yeah.
I think across any professional sport.
Sure.
So, at least the guys who are kind of at the top of designated hitters, I'll give them some credit. I think there are a lot of players who are by de facto designated hitters that aren't real. It shouldn't be, and that's where kind of you get into some of the trouble. But anyway, we can.
Yeah, that's a whole nother. It's fine. I mean, I'm okay with having this conversation because I think people. You get a lot of people that either hate it or love it because they're AL people or NL people, and I think most people watching this are NL people.
I would hope so
because they're talking about the Dodgers.
Right.
So, the DH, whatever. But Edwin Rios would be a perfect guy for that.
So we asked, should the Dodgers consider trading for Mookie Betts? Somebody said yes. Include Dave Roberts in that trade.
All right. Well, Dave Roberts. I think Dave Roberts, as we talked about last week, is one of those guys that is in a weird predicament right here. And I don't know if this is just me. I don't know. I know you agreed with me last week, but maybe your mind has changed since you get to actually be there and hear what Andrew Friedman and Dave Roberts have to say. But they were talking. I think he needs World Series or bust next year.
I think so. I think it's definitely at that point. At minimum, I believe it's, and it sounds fun. Like at least get to the World Series because the team had been there. They've been 2 years in a row. Right. Obviously, you have the kind of disaster ending this year. If Roberts gets them back to the World Series and some fluke result happens or leads to a Game 7 heartbreaking loss, then perhaps, he's back again. But short of that, I mean, at that point, he would have been here for
5
5
years.
years.
Which is pretty long for a Dodgers manager.
Which is a long time. And, to not have a World Series ring, I know you were close in 17 and then lost in 5 games 2018. It's just, it's setting up to be what it was for, I think, Don Mattingly, where it's, win the World Series or we're going to mutually agree to part ways.
Right, because you're basically, Dave Roberts is at a point in his career is that you can only take me so far.
Right.
If you can only take me so far, then you're not the right guy for the job. And it's also crazy because how much is Andrew Friedman doing a lot of the decision making? How much is Dave Roberts doing the decision making? A lot of times you're hearing Dave Roberts, he talks about his gut. And he's like, oh, well, I just went with how I felt here. I felt like this was the right move. And every time he's felt like this was the right move, it's turned out poorly for the Dodgers.
At least in the playoffs.
Right, in the playoffs.
His gut during the regular season is awesome.
It's just a different world.
He pushes, we'll get, we'll tweet out the lineup, we'll get complaints.
Yeah.
Why is so-and-so starting? Well, that so-and-so just hit a leadoff home run, and now the Dodgers,
yeah, right.
But yeah, in the playoffs, like you said, it magnifies, obviously, and a manager can literally cost you a series.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think he might be at that point. Real fast before we go any further, and I do want to go back to Francisco Lindor and Mookie Betts and what that means, like what that would actually mean. We're going to play a game, and we're just going to say, hey, we actually got Francisco Lindor and see what the movement looks like. But before I do want to mention that this hat right here that you see right here, this says Los Angeles versus the world. This is from Bleed Los. Bleed Los does a great job you can find hats for Dodger stuff. They have great shirts. They have great hats at Bleed Los on Instagram and on Twitter. And where you can find this, there's also going to start doing some Lakers stuff. So if you're looking for some Laker gear, you may look around. Coming soon, there will be some Bleed Los Lakers gear. But make sure to go check it out. Bleed Los has a ton of these hats. I love them. I wear them all the time, all over the place. Great, great stuff. And don't be afraid to go and check that out. All right, so we wanted to get back into Francisco Lindor because that's the big news of the day, right? So let's just play a game. Let's just assume that Francisco Lindor is traded to the Dodgers, and we trade only prospects. So that means that Corey Seager's here. Maybe he gets traded, maybe he doesn't. But let's just say that you have the team intact, and it was just you gave up 6 prospects, right? Ooh. I know it's a lot, but we have to play something, so I have to be able to.
Okay.
What does the infield look like? Because now you have two shortstops in Seager and in Lindor. You have a rookie in Gavin Lux. You have a third baseman that's about 35 years old in Justin Turner. You have Max Muncy, and you can have and I'm probably missing somebody else. No, I think that's about right. So where does everybody fit in this situation?
Okay, so if the Lindor trade is completed, then you rule. I think it's safe to say you rule out Rendon.
Right.
So then at that point you move Seager to third base.
Okay.
There's been speculation that it would come at some point anyway. You put Justin Turner at first. You put Max Muncy at second base. And I think we can all see who's the odd man out.
Is Gavin Lux. So now Gavin Lux was the guy that you stuck around with forever and was the guy that you refused to put into any trades. You refused to move him. He made his way from Double-A to the majors in one season by just destroying Triple-A. And I think there's going to be if he balls out in preseason or in spring training. Yeah, preseason, spring training, same thing. Then how do you not give him a spot?
Well, I'll answer that by saying if Lindor is here, I think there's a decent shot that Gavin Lux is in Cleveland.
So Gavin Lux would be one of the guys that would have to move. I mean,
possibly. I mean, because if you're the Indians, how do you kind of trade one of your franchise cornerstones at shortstop without maybe replacing him? And if you're the Dodgers, then that discussion and decision comes down to where do you think Gavin Lux can go? If his ceiling is higher than that of Lindor's, then you just don't make the trade at all.
Right.
You just stick with Lux. If you think Lindor can ultimately be the better player, then maybe you do it. And if you don't necessarily have to trade Lux to the Indians, you could possibly use him to then get somebody else.
Right.
Another kind of marquee talent that fills a hole probably in your starting rotation.
Right. So, all right. So there's also other things that you could possibly do that I was thinking about on Mason and Ireland earlier today. I think Mason might have mentioned it a little bit. Here's the thing. So you have, I know it doesn't make a huge difference, but it does make a bit of a difference, is that Max Muncy is a lefty and Justin Turner is a righty. Now, do you prefer a lefty or a righty at first base? Does it matter to you?
Well, in terms of like hitting, because they both catch with this with the same hand.
Right, but it's just like your lefty, you're like moving out more. It's just a different way of catching. So
No. Muncy catches.
oh, does he cut? Does he switch? Oh,
he's only hit. He only hits left-handed.
Gotcha. So ignore that.
But to answer the question, I wouldn't put much stock in that.
Yeah, I don't.
But
either.
I'm also. I mean, I'm sure the Dodgers have their analytics department that have looked at if it's a lefty or a right-hander hitter catching, whatever, however you want to describe him.
So what you can possibly do also is have Justin Turner be the going back to a utility guy. That is, I know he would hate it. You can still get him. You can play him almost every day because someone's going to need a day off almost every day, and you just move him from third base to first base and back to third base if you need him at second every once in a while. He has played it in the past, so you leave Lux at second, and you leave Muncy at first, and you leave Seager at third, and Lindor at short, and then Justin Turner kind of just fills in the gaps on every day, kind of like a Kike Hernandez who played most of the year without being injured.
I guess if he's playing most of the day, that something like that could work. But I think his being a right-handed hitter and being one of their more productive and steady hitters, that's a difficult proposition to kind of sell on. Hey, let's take Justin Turner out of the lineup possibly 3 times a week.
I agree. I'm just throwing out different scenarios.
I mean, who knows? I don't know if the Dodgers would go down that path, and maybe there's been some speculation that perhaps Lux would even shift to the outfield.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily see. He hasn't played it, and it's not. I'm not saying that he can't. I just don't know. And they have a ton of outfielders, so that doesn't make sense to me.
No, yeah, putting him in the outfield doesn't really make too much sense to me either. But yeah, no. So for the most part, let's be serious. If Lindor comes, you're trading Corey Seager. And probably Gavin Lux too. I mean, would you think? Would it be like one or the other?
I think it's one.
Trade?
I think it's one or the other.
Right.
And it doesn't. And which Morosi noted, Seager wouldn't necessarily have to go to the Indians in that trade.
No.
That being said, I don't know how that trade gets completed if he's not in it, because I mean, then the alternative is you're tapping into your prospects.
Right. And so what could it? I mean, who else could possibly go in it? It has to be. We were looking at it. The Dodgers are very heavy on catchers. They have Will Smith. They have Keibert Ruiz. They have Diego Cartaya. They have another guy named Connor Wong. So that's 4 catchers that are all like Diego Cartaya is a Venezuelan catcher who's probably another year or 2 away before he can even get up there. Yeah, at least. So he's not ready. But here's the thing: if you look at the starting catchers besides Will Smith, was Austin Barnes and Russell Martin. Russell Martin, you don't think is coming back, do you?
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. Austin Barnes, do you think that's a guy who's coming back and to be a backup catcher to Will Smith?
Yeah, that's. I mean, so I guess I may have to retract my answer on Russell Martin, because I mean, if Austin Barnes, I don't think will play the backup role. I don't know if that really makes sense for anybody involved.
Right.
So perhaps you end up trading him, and then you resign Martin to be your veteran back. The Dodgers will have veteran backup catcher somehow.
Right. They always do.
I guess I shouldn't rule out Russell Martin just because of the familiarity from not just this past season, but the years before. He's started with the
probably
organization.
Getting pretty cheap.
And I think it would be a team-friendly deal.
Yeah.
So under that notion, I think Martin, there's a good chance he's back.
So what do you think of having a Keibert Ruiz Will Smith tandem?
That I don't think you do, because you want both of them playing to continue to develop. If
right.
Ruiz is sitting on the bench up here in the majors, it wouldn't do him any good.
Right. So and it's also Will Smith if he's sitting.
Right. And so I think Will Smith should be the starting catcher next year. And I personally would be willing to deal Ruiz, let him be a headliner in some sort of major trade.
Sure. So Ruiz is a catcher, and catcher is a kind of a premium position at this point. There's not a ton of great catchers in this league. It's really like JT Realmuto. Buster Posey isn't that guy anymore. There's really not too many great catchers. I mean, Martin Maldonado is getting a lot of time.
Grandal is sometimes.
I mean, he was an all-star. Take that as you will. So Grandal, but there's very few great catchers. So people think that, or at least the Dodgers think that Ruiz and Smith both can be that way. Yeah. Make him one of the headliners, and he's also a top 3 prospect in their system. And really, with Gavin Lux and Dustin May up, he's the number 1 prospect. Yep. But Dick ipso facto, which I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, but he went from 3 to 1, so he's your number 1 prospect. He's a big portion of what you would probably give to to Cincinnati, to Cleveland or Boston,
Yeah.
assuming that you go with Mookie Betts. And I think it's important to mention that Mookie Betts, just for a second, is on his last year of arbitration. So you can sign him to an arbitration deal, whether he wants to agree with it or not, or the Red Sox may, but they'll probably move him. If they move him, it's going to be for a bigger deal. People are going to want to sign him to a big deal, and it's not going to just be a 1-year rental type situation.
That kind of, if the Red Sox have, understandably set the bar high for a Mookie Betts trade, it wouldn't be shocking to see him begin the season with them, and then he's somebody who's moved before the deadline, which then at that point, I think the Dodgers become a player because they've made a splash at the deadline, and Friedman has shown, he's willing to do that.
Right, and they would probably give him the money too at that point because they're willing to give it. But this is the problem too. I mean, you're bringing in a bunch of guys that are going to need to be paid. Walker Buehler needs to be paid. Cody Bellinger is going to need to be paid. Gavin Lux is pretty low, but if you do for some reason keep Corey Seager, he's going to need to be paid.
Right.
There's a lot of guys that are coming up on that, so we're either going to see a gigantic change in the team or we're going to see basically everybody stick around for the money that they just end up getting.
Yeah.
So who would you prefer between the two of them? Mookie Betts or Francisco Lindor? Ooh. It's tough, right?
Yeah, that's a really tough question.
One has a World Series championship ring.
I would take Mookie Betts.
Yeah.
All things kind of being equal, money, whatever you have to, like if it's not outrageous to trade for him, whatever the case, I think I do Mookie Betts.
Yeah.
You put him in the outfield with Bellinger, and I think it could be that I saw him obviously in the World Series, kind of in person and a little more up close than catching the Red Sox occasionally playing. That'd be my pick.
All right, so Jorge Mercado says, does adding a bat make sense when your pitching is depleted, especially if Ryu leaves? Now, that's an interesting concept in itself.
Yeah, you and I kind of sort of disagree, I think, on the pitching depth.
So where are you on the pitching depth?
I think that it's lacking.
I think it's lacking?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, it's young. I'm not going to deny that.
Okay. I don't see the Dodgers, yes, May and Gonsolin came up and had an impact, and I think they both have bright futures. I don't see the Dodgers having really either one of them in their opening day rotation next year.
Really? So what is the opening day rotation then?
Well,
let's say
that's exactly.
Okay, all right, so let's go on that then. So let's say Ryu leaves because especially if Ryu leaves. So let's just say he does. What is your starting rotation? If you don't make any moves, you don't bring in any starters, and are you okay with that?
I mean, it could win the NL West.
Well, anything can win the NL West.
You'd have Buehler, Kershaw, Maeda,
Stripling, Urias, Gonsolin, May.
And none of those guys have gone a full season in the rotation on a regular basis.
No,
so
but neither had Buehler until then.
I think, but Buehler. So the way the Dodgers have handled their pitchers, I don't see May and Gonsolin making that leap yet. I think they have another kind of benchmark and a quote unquote innings limit that they have to hit, and then 2021 is when they'd be unleashed.
So it's about 3. It's just, yeah, I agree with that. Yes, 2021 is when the idea has always been that Julio Urias is going to be in the starting rotation next year. So your top 3 pitchers are now, no matter what, is going to be Buehler, Kershaw, Urias, and that's without Ryu. And Urias, you really need 3. It's really about 3 to 5 pitchers. 3 to 4 are your top ones, and the 5th one's kind of always just like a floating guy.
Yeah, my concern with Urias is he ready? Are they going to let him pitch the innings? That's
been a talk.
I am all right, and I'm all for it. Like I believe that he can be a starter, but like we touched on last week, if you look at his innings pitched this year, it was like 100, like including the postseason.
Yeah, I mean it is a jump, but they've been holding him off more so. They put him in the bullpen to save some of his innings.
I hope so.
For next year.
I hope so.
Yeah, so if that's the idea, that's why I'm on the other side. Is because you have Buehler, Urias, Kershaw. Those are your top 3. It's usually 3 starters that are really good, and then 2 that are.
Then you have Maeda will start.
Maeda will start because he has a contract that says that he needs to start to help him get the incentives. But fine, even if you don't use him, you can mix between May and Gonsolin. They don't have to. They don't have to go deep into the entire year. You can have half the season with May, half the season with Gonsolin, and then towards the end of the year, kind of bring them both together where they both can have some time. Ross Stripling was an all-star 2 years ago. He pitched pretty well down the stretch. He's another guy that will probably be in the starting rotation, and you're kind of hoping that he's in that area. Rich Hill wants to come back. I don't know if he's
Right.
going to, but he would probably come back on a very small deal. So there's another starting pitcher that you have. There's other guys that are in the minor leagues that could get spot starts as well. Dennis Santana has had spot starts. We haven't seen Mitchell White, but he's a guy that eventually has to get up there or you move him. There's so many people that I just feel like can get. We talked about Josiah Gray. He's moved himself up. He could probably make it into that rotation.
I think he's up in September.
Yeah. So that's a September guy. So there's always somebody that's right there. I mean, you're already talking about 6, 7 guys. Now, it doesn't sound as good as Verlander, Cole, Greinke, of course, or it doesn't sound as good as Strasburg, Scherzer, Corbin, but we've seen what happened to Corbin in the postseason.
Yeah.
He had one good game, and he's kind of blown up a little bit. And Scherzer kind of is hurt. We don't even know if he's going to pitch again.
Yeah.
So, but like and Cole's probably going to leave, so their pitching staff is not going to be the same. So I think that's a pretty strong pitching staff that can get you through the NL West and hopefully move you through the playoffs.
To steal, I will agree. To steal the tagline and kind of slogan from the Warriors, it's strength in numbers. So there's definitely depth to it.
Right.
There's talent. I just don't. I think it would be a little too tricky if you went into the season saying, "Okay, our plan is to have Dustin May make 8 starts in a row, and then we option him to the minors and bring up Gonsolin, and then he makes." Like I think that kind of planning will end up kind of tripping you up because if there's one thing, and I'm sure you've seen it, that with baseball, the minute you try to plan,
No, it doesn't work out.
yeah, backfires.
Absolutely.
So that's where I come from when I say pitching concerns.
Sure, and they don't have to go down, but the fact is you can go to, especially it would help Kershaw at this point in his career, you can go to a longer rotation. Maybe you can still have Buehler go his every 5 games, but other guys can go 6 days. You don't need them to be on a regular schedule all the time, which as much as I like regular schedule, I kind of want them fresh into September because they should beat everybody in the NL West. They should win the NL West again for the 8th year in a row.
Right.
So I'd rather everybody be fresh when we get to the postseason. And really, from everything we're understanding, the 10-day IL is going back to a 15-day IL. And that ruins the Dodgers' plans because they love to mess around.
And the expanded rosters are no longer going to be up to 40.
Right.
That'll throw a wrench in their plans. Yeah.
Right. So everything's all changing up there. So you don't get to just bring up a whole bunch of pitchers in September. So now you kind of have to have an idea of what you want to do there. So I think it sounds better than I would look. If I can get Garrett Cole and I could sign him, I'd do it in a heartbeat. That dude is unbelievable. I saw a graphic yesterday, and it was one of those graphics where they threw 2 pitches at once from his hand.
Saw that.
You saw that one? Yeah. It was a fastball and it was a curveball.
Yeah.
And one went like straight and kind of had a dip to it, and the other one, the curveball, went way up, and they both landed in the exact same spot in the middle of the strike zone. It was unbelievable. That dude has so much control. If I can get Garrett Cole, absolutely I'd do it. But the problem is he's going to need, 5-6 years?
At least.
And the Dodgers don't give pitchers 5-6 years. And I actually agree with the fact of don't give pitchers 5-6 years.
That's fair. I mean, if you're going to extend yourself for a premier talent, just do it on the position player side.
Yep.
And there's no shortage, whether it's, again, going back to you kind of empty the cupboard a little bit in the trade market with your prospects, or if you go out make a run at Rendon and you decide, he's the guy we want to really offer this long-term contract to. I think it would have been Arenado had he not
signed the giant
his
deal. Yep.
So.
But with Rendon, I love Anthony Rendon. I think he's a great player. He's 30, almost 31 years old, so he's on the other side of 30. From what I understand, we had Buster Olney on Mason Ireland a couple weeks ago, and he said that Anthony Rendon is not a guy that wants the years. Mm-hmm. He wants the money. Mm-hmm. So does he stay in Washington where, they have the 3 great pitchers depending on what happens with Strasburg, because he's also a free agent. And he's going to make, or he's not a free agent, but he's going to make $41 million, something crazy like that. So what's going to happen with him? If Rendon does decide to leave, he can be in LA. He can have a 4-year deal till he's about 35. He fits in well here. He has patient at bats. That would be the one reason why I would be okay with Corey Seager maybe moving on, is because he is a first ball fastball hitter. He swings at the first pitch always,
Yeah.
except for in the postseason when he didn't, even though it was right down the middle of the plate, and that was a whole other thing.
The times he really should have were the 2 times he didn't.
Oh God, those are it's like they knew he was going to not swing at this one, so they
Gave him a cookie.
they gave him a cookie and he just watched it right go by. Just insanity. So I don't know. So Think Blue 11 says Zach Wheeler would have to give a draft pick. Strasburg, Cole, trade for Noah. I mean, what is your biggest? A lot of people are talking about pitching, and I saw someone earlier asking about relief pitching. I'm pretty sure you know my feelings on relief pitching, but what is yours? Where do you think the Dodgers should go?
I think you go for a position player.
Yeah.
You go for one of the top position players. You put him in your lineup, whether it's a Rendon, whether it's a Mookie Betts, whether it's a Francisco Lindor, however that kind of shakes out. And then you get into the regular season and you see what you have with your starting rotation and your bullpen. Relief pitchers are always available at the trade deadline.
Sure are.
And look at Adam Kolarek.
Yep.
Everybody was expecting, to go after Felipe Vasquez and all these other, big
Shane
name pitchers.
Green and yep.
They get Kolarek, a little bit of a letdown on the surface. Like, who is he? Oh, he's another guy from Tampa Bay. That's all Andrew Friedman trades for. He ended up being probably the best relief pitcher after the trade deadline.
Yeah, he was the best. He ended up being kind of the prize because everyone else was kind of terrible.
Yeah.
In that sense. But, I mean, look at Fernando Rodney was one of the guys that the Washington went after, and he is blowing up again in the postseason because that's what he does. But, yeah, that's my whole thing with relief pitching. And people go, we need relief pitching. We need relief pitching. The guys you have at the beginning of the year are never, ever the guys that you have at the end of the year. It just never happens. The Dodgers bullpen, besides minus a couple guys that you signed, like we talked about it last week, was Baez, Kelly, and Jansen. Besides those three, nobody else was in the rotation for relief pitchers at the beginning of the year because it all changed as the season went on.
And I think we're also kind of starting to see a little bit of a shift with how in the postseason, which is really all we're talking about, because the regular season, Yimi Garcia was on the roster all year long.
The whole season, because they couldn't get rid of him.
They could have DFA'd him, but they didn't want to lose. He's somebody who could kind of, pitch here and there when you need him. So we're talking about the postseason. When you get to October, how bullpens are being used, I think, is changing.
Yep.
And the Dodgers subscribed to it more aggressively this year than I think they have in years past. The Red Sox obviously did it to them. Mm-hmm. So we were just going over their surplus of young starting pitchers. Dustin May in the bullpen next season, fine.
Right.
So I wouldn't really worry about going after a big relief pitcher. I think the priority needs to be a marquee position player. If that's not in the cards, then you go for, within reason, a top starter. Only because I think the more talent you have on the team, and nothing is guaranteed, obviously, but you still want to assemble as much talent as you possibly can. Eventually, that should rise to the top. And then you go from there with your bullpen. I wouldn't really worry about.
I have no interest in any big free agent signing that has to do with the bullpen.
And they're probably not going to be too aggressive with the bullpen anyway. They just signed Joe Kelly last year.
Right.
A couple years ago, they signed Kenley Jansen to his big contract that he's probably opting into for the remaining 2 years.
He'd be crazy not to.
So Friedman doesn't spend on the bullpen anyway, so there's no reason to really expect that to change this winter.
No, and I totally agree with you. And relief pitching is just one of those things that if we go after another Tom Kohler, I'm going to be really upset. That's just not how that works. You have the money, you have the prospects, you have the talent up front that you can actually make a move for a Francisco Lindor, which is what John Palmarosi is talking about. There's rumors about Mookie Betts that we talked about earlier. One of those two guys should be a Dodger next year. I mean, I think as long as one of those two teams are actually trading them, if they decide yes, we're trading them, one of them should be a Dodger.
So let's throw it would be obviously through free agency. Let's throw Rendon into that conversation. Sure. If you had to pick one of the three, who are you taking?
Based on of the three, let's see. I think Rendon's a little bit too old, but you can get him for a cost-friendly contract probably, or a year-friendly contract. Mookie Betts, I think, is probably the best overall athlete of all of them. Mm-hmm. So I'd probably go with him. And also, he's a great guy, and he seems to really get the city and get the fans and all that. Francisco Lindor is a Heart and Hustle Award winner which hustle means so much in this game of baseball. And he has been a fantastic shortstop. To find a great shortstop is tough, but you do have two in Corey Seager and Gavin Lux that can both play that position. You can still move Corey Seager and keep Gavin Lux. Yeah. So I think out of everything, I would go with Mookie Betts in that situation, which I know you said Mookie also. But out of the three of them, actually, you didn't add in Rendon.
Right. So, and that's now going to change my answer.
Is it going to?
Yeah, I go with Rendon.
Really?
I think.
So you don't trade. You don't get one of those two guys available. No. You go for the 31-year-old.
Yeah, I think if he's looking for a 4-year, 5-year deal and just a high salary, that's right in the Dodgers' wheelhouse.
It is.
And I think having another right-handed bat with Justin Turner to balance out and put more length in the lineup.
Right.
And his approach fits well with the team.
It does. It does fit very well with the team.
And then it buys you a little bit more time with Seager and Lux. You can kind of figure out what you do there.
Well, your infield is pretty much set at that point then, because if you go after Rendon, even if you do bring in Rendon, you're set where you have Rendon at third, you move Turner over to first, you have Lux at second, you have Muncy at second, and then you figure out who's the better of the two between Lux and Seager.
And again, I don't know if Lux. I wasn't convinced that before the Rendon and Lindor rumors obviously kind of surfaced. I wasn't necessarily convinced that Lux was going to be on the opening day roster next season anyway.
Right.
I'm not.
You don't think? Really?
I don't know. And
it happens all the time when you bring a guy up in September and then they end up having a great spring and they're there at the beginning of the year. Cody Bellinger was that guy.
I just don't.
Corey Seager was that guy.
If there isn't anywhere to play him,
yep.
I don't know if I don't see them doing it.
All right, so we're only got a couple minutes left, so let's go through some of the fan questions. Okay. All right, so I'm sorry that we were having our own discussion, so I kind of stuck away from the fans a little bit today, so I apologize for that, but it just depends on the day. We're doing this, we're on an off-season show, so for the most part, we're going to have the discussion that we want to talk about. Chris Macy-Jazak, sorry, I don't know how to say it. You'd think they'd trade Kershaw? I hope not. I don't think you can trade Kershaw, do you? I mean, he's got a $30+ million contract for the next 2 years.
Probably not. If the Dodgers are trading him, they're eating 65% of that contract.
Easy.
Which at that point you might have. Look, the way the season ended for Kershaw in October was bad. He was still a good pitcher. He's not the Clayton Kershaw that we all remember, which I think is the issue.
Right.
He's still a pretty good second or third option.
Absolutely.
In your rotation in a playoff series.
I totally agree with you. He was a guy that he had around a 3 ERA. He won 12 to 14 games, somewhere right around there. Yeah. I don't remember the exact number, but he's done kind of what you want him to do. So I don't know. Let's see. We got Jorge Mercado. Does adding a bat make sense when your pitching is depleting? Oh, we did that one a little bit, but yes, I think that Ryu. But he very well can come back. Jonathan Watson asked, "What about the Mookie Betts rumor?" We talked a lot about Mookie Betts. I think I personally am on board with Mookie Betts over Rendon and Francisco Lindor. Basically the same age. He's 27 years old. He's a fantastic ball player. He fits into the system. He's a great guy all around in the clubhouse, the whole deal. I think he fits. You go with Anthony Rendon over Betts and Lindor. So I think out of the three, Lindor is the one left out, even though I think he would be a fantastic addition.
Yeah, I mean,
you're not going wrong.
Yeah, to be clear, there's no quote-unquote wrong answer with any of the three.
No, absolutely not. Elijah Ramirez says, what about Fernando Valenzuela? All right, well, that would be great if we could reincarnate Fernando, but that ain't happening. Think Blue 11 relief pitching, take a low-cost flyer on Brandon Morrow. I mean, and maybe in a minor league deal. He's got a ton of money from the Cubs. I don't know if that contract is still.
If it wasn't for his elbow, like if it was literally almost any other injury, I'd be open to it. But elbow, and unfortunately, I suspected that something like that was going to become the Dodgers. He pitched in every World Series game that in 2017, and
yeah,
unfortunate for him.
Yeah, it really was unfortunate for him, but he got his money, so that's all that matters. Bill Diddy says, "Why don't you answer your viewers just like Robertson Friedman? Don't pay attention to the fans." We do. We actually this is very much a show of the people where we answer a lot of your questions. Today was just one that we wanted to have a conversation that we wanted to have, and a lot about the things that you guys already wanted to talk about. It was mostly about Francisco Lindor and Mookie Betts and Rendon and Strasburg and those kind of things. And so that's kind of why we just had the conversation anyway. But we normally do. We got Chris Macy-Jazak which I don't know if I'm saying that name wrong, so I'm really sorry. That's a tough one to say. Mac and cheese is easier. I totally agree with you guys. Mac and cheese is easy, and I love it. And
I
it's
do
delicious.
love mac and cheese. I'm a big mac and cheese
If
fan,
you're not a
so.
big mac and cheese guy, then I can't really have a conversation with you. I like to add a little something to it, like I put some bacon in it every once in a while, or some onion. I like red onion in there.
Oh, no, I won't do onion.
Ooh, yeah, it's really good. Some chicken, put some chicken or broccoli. Yeah, big fan of making it a little bit more too. Nathan Larentzar says, hashtag, oh boy, here we go. You ready for this? Hashtag, when will people realize that the Dodgers won't win a World Series with Roberts?
I mean, they were literally one game away from doing it. It's not, and if Kenley Jansen, and I don't want to rehash
No, we're not
everything,
rehashing 2017.
If Kenley Jansen doesn't give up a home run in Game 2, that series finishes a lot different, and we're not really having this discussion about Dave Roberts. And again, this year we got into this before. The Game 5 loss I put on him in his decision making late. I didn't agree with it, but the first and even Game 5, so the entire series, he wasn't up there taking those at bats.
Right,
and we don't need to get into that again.
No, I mean there was a lot of poor decision making when the guys that were batting. You saw AJ Pollock strike out 11 of 13 times. You saw Corey Seager be terrible on the offensive end. You saw Cody Bellinger basically fall apart in the postseason once again. And it really, when he won the NLCS MVP, and I'm sorry to go backwards, but when he won the NLCS MVP, he had one big hit and a one diving catch, and that's what gave him MVP.
Yeah, that was almost. We don't really know who to give it to. These are the memorable highlights. I mean, and the Dodgers needed those play. I mean, he obviously came up huge for them, but yeah, I remember when that game ended, thinking, well, who's getting MVP? And it literally could have been 3 or 4 players, and I would have said, oh, well, that makes sense.
Right, and it was because he made that diving catch that gave him the MVP, which I think, and the home run in the Game 7. So, wow, going to make some mac and cheese now.
We're coming over.
Yeah, I need some mac and cheese. Patrick Cullen, maybe make a trade because the free agents Pollock and Kelly didn't work out that great. Make a trade is best. I mean, just because something doesn't work once doesn't mean it's not going to work again. So going after a free agent doesn't always spell disaster. Right. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Making a trade sometimes works out, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, look at Yordan Alvarez. It was Yordan Alvarez for Josh Fields. Josh Fields isn't in the major leagues anymore. Yordan Alvarez just hit a World Series home run last night. Yeah. So these things happen. It's, and there was actually Andrew Friedman talked about how he wishes that they would have given somebody else besides Alvarez when they asked for it before. It just, sometimes trades work and sometimes they don't. Sometimes free agents work, sometimes they don't. You sometimes make the best move. And at the time, Delino DeShields for Pedro Martinez was like, oh, what a great move. Pedro Martinez has not been pitching well at all. Delino DeShields is an all-star second baseman. He's fantastic. Yeah, who got the better side of that deal?
Well, and your Casey Blake trade falls into that.
It does, but Casey Blake was fine. I liked Casey Blake. The rest of it, I think, what was this? Casey Blake and Jeff Shaw, right? Was that deal?
I believe.
And then it was for...
Carlos Santana.
It's Carlos Santana. Yeah, so Carlos Santana has been around a lot longer, but he hasn't done too much. He's, hits a bunch of home runs, and he's a good player, but Casey Blake was great alongside with Manny Ramirez. It was fantastic. So that's whatever. That's just my little thing. I'm also trying to make myself feel better.
Yeah.
Jared Montiel says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do the Dodgers need to make a big move this offseason?
I think so. Big move. I guess it depends how you kind of define it. I think there needs to be, whether it's through a marquee player or just a significant change with, maybe somebody's no longer starting, or however you want to define it. I put that honestly at about a 7, and I think, and it's not a knee jerk reaction. I think that, look, you made it to the World Series 2 years in a row. If you had gotten there again and fallen short, okay, like that's one thing. Maybe you see what your weakness was, you try to address that.
Right.
You were eliminated in the first round, and I understand it's to a Nationals team that sort of got hot and now is in the World Series, and they seem to have had the wind taken out of their sails a little bit. Mm-hmm. The Dodgers were the best team in that. Like, there was really no excuse for that to happen. And so if you're keeping Dave Roberts as manager, which I agree with for this season, if you're keeping Andrew Friedman as president of baseball operations, which I agree with, there needs to be a big, quote-unquote, big move somewhere else, and that's on the roster.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think about a 7, and I think it's important that this is one of those years that, yes, you do need to make a big deal.
I guess how I would phrase it is an impact move.
Yes, an impact move. That means a position player or a big starting pitcher like a Garrett Cole or Steven Strasburg. Because I love the idea of either having Walker Buehler next to Garrett Cole or Walker Buehler next to Steven Strasburg. They're two totally different pitchers, but you're having Walker Buehler throwing 100 miles an hour, and then you could also have Garrett Cole throwing heat, or you can have Steven Strasburg going more to his curveball and being more of a control type pitcher. I like the idea of both, and I would take both of them in a heartbeat, but they have to be for the right deal. And Steven Strasburg is going to ask for the moon, and so is Garrett Cole. So it just doesn't seem
I don't see it.
Right. So I don't think one of those two are the right guys. Tupac since 71 says, how about Jeremy Jeffress as a reclamation project?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. I'm totally against it. It's also, he's probably going to want money, and he's probably going to want something important, and he is a relief pitcher, and I don't need more relief pitching. Nathan Larenzar says, yes, we lost because of Roberts. I think we've already agreed on that. Jared Montiel, on a scale of 1 to 10, we did this already. Think Blue 11. He also made a big hit in Game 7 of the NLCS that year. Yes, he did. It was a home run. We talked about that as well. Nathan Larenzer says, my dad predicted that Hay will hit 2 home runs against Kershaw.
Take your dad to go buy lotto tickets.
Yeah, because nobody was expecting him to get 2 home runs on 2 pitches.
Yeah.
Let's see. Chris Macy-Jazak says, I know you guys aren't big on relief, but Chapman?
Not happening.
Nope.
There's, I think, obviously his personal issues that came up when the Dodgers backed away from the trade. Mm-hmm. I don't think that they'll be willing to go down that path with just that history. And then there's the financial aspect. They won't pay him what Chapman's going to make, which, depending on where you stand morally, you could rank those 1 and 2 as to why a signing won't happen, but it's not.
I think the other part of it, too, is that he is a guy that throws basically 100 miles an hour, and that's the extent of his abilities. And he's been kind of figured out. He'll be fine in the regular season where he's going to get you saves and, he'll be good. But when it comes to the postseason, dude gets hit. Yeah. I mean, it's just how it is. I've seen him blow games over and over again, despite the fact that he throws 100 miles an hour. It's not so much about speed anymore. I think people are, especially major league players, are catching up to speed. 100 miles an hour is like 95 to them now.
Yeah, I think at this point, if you're a pitcher, you're better off throwing 94, 95 with movement, as opposed to 100, 101 that's just straight. Right. Unless you can paint the outside corner low and away every single time, you're going to get lined up and hit.
Totally agree. I mean, that's just what it is. I think that's why guys like Walker Buehler, who can throw 100 miles an hour, but have so many other pitches to go along, and they're all plus pitches too, that he can use different pitches to keep you off balance, and then use his 100 miles an hour that still has a little bit of movement to it. I think that's what's important, and I think you're exactly right. Nathan Larenzar says they should trade Pollock, Barnes, and Kelly. Good luck.
It takes 2.
Yeah. Somebody needs to. I mean, if there's anything that Andrew Friedman can do, though, he can move big contracts. He moved Matt Kemp twice.
Yeah.
That contract is an albatross, and he moved it twice. So if anybody could, it would be Andrew Friedman. I just don't think it happens.
Definitely not. Barnes. Barnes, I think he could be a throw-in in a trade. That wouldn't be surprising.
No.
Kelly, I don't see them moving off of. I think they'll chalk this up to a bit of a down year for various issues. He was coming back home. There was, as much as he tried to downplay it, there might have been some external pressure to live up to that. And then he had his injury in September. So, because he did start to pitch well.
Yeah.
Pollock, I think Pollock, it is what he is, who he is. He's a streaky player who gets hurt in weird ways.
Yep.
And that's what this season was. And his down streak came at the absolute worst time.
Absolutely. And he's a guy that usually hits lefties, and he was terrible against lefties in the postseason, and it was kind of confusing because that's what he was there for, was just to be able to hit a lefty. Jermaine Armenta says, big splash or nothing. I don't want to see Friedman go yard sale shopping for players. I agree. I think it is. You go with it needs to be a big name. That's why if you don't end up getting Anthony Rendon in free agency, maybe he stays with Washington, then I think trading for Lindor or trading for Betts is the right move, and you have the assets, you have the money, you have a lot of things to make both of those things happen. Yeah. Just a couple more, and then we're going to get out of here. Patrick Cullen says, I have seen rumors about Stanton. Oh, God. Any truth to that? Sorry if you've already talked about that. We have not, Patrick, but Giancarlo Stanton scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, and I don't know how substantiated that is. I haven't necessarily seen it come from I don't want like a reputable source. So
Right.
I think that was more 2-3 years ago with the Marlins. Now it's not.
He's not the same guy, and I don't think he was healthy once this year. Maybe like a few games. I don't know. He was a disaster, and when he was the year before, he went like 0 for his first like 15 at Dodgers or at Yankee Stadium. It was crazy. He wasn't able to get a hit to save his life. All right, it says think Blue 11, but I heard it's Dave's fault. AJ couldn't hit. No, I get that was funny, but it's that's obviously not true. Chris Massiajizek, I'm just gonna call you Chris. I'm not gonna try and say that name again. Sorry. I'm gonna call you Chris Mack. How about that? How about Chris Mack?
I think isn't he the one who was asking about the mac and cheese anyway?
Yes, he was. So there you go. That does fit. Is Jansen closing still? I think he'll have a rebound year. What do you guys think?
He will start off next season as the closer.
Yes.
And I agree, he will settle in somewhere between. I don't think he'll reach his peak form just because age and attrition is kind of set in. And again, it's not an indictment on him. It happens to everybody. I don't think he will be as bad of a pitcher as we saw this year.
No.
So he'll land somewhere in the middle, similar to Kershaw, where he is still effective. He's just not the dominant pitcher you remember him and probably want him to still be.
The only thing that worries me when it comes to Jansen is the fact that he's a guy that was not put in with the bases loaded in the 10th inning. They instead of bringing in Kenley Jansen in the 10th inning after Joe Kelly pitched the 9th inning and pitched a good 9th inning, they didn't even bring in Kenley Jansen. Joe Kelly ended up walking the bases loaded or making the bases loaded, and they still didn't bring in Kenley Jansen. So the trust in Kenley Jansen was gone. And I think that is something that would affect him and make him so. I think you're right, and that he brings that he opts back into his contract. But it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't, based on those types of moves. That they don't know. We don't know what his role is going to be. Whether they trust him as a closer role. Fans obviously don't trust him as a closer anymore.
Right.
And they showed that by not bringing him in the 10th inning, that they don't really trust him either in a pressure-packed situation.
Yeah, I think there was definitely some concern as to what Kenley you were going to get this year anytime you sent him out. From what Friedman said at his press conference after the season ended for the Dodgers, every indication is they believe, and it was the message that was consistent all year long, was his mechanics. And if he can kind of get that synced back up this offseason, if he can take the time where he's not having to worry about pitching in an actual game tomorrow night, then he should get back on track. That's at least the belief. I will add to it that I think Kenley needs to not rely on his cutter as often.
Agreed.
And if he still remains insistent on throwing nothing but cutter, he will run into the same trouble.
Right. Well, that's when he was throwing like 15 cutters in a row.
Right.
That's when he's in a bad spot. When he's offsetting it with a slider and, the 2-seam fastball, or was it 4-seam fastball? It was 2? Yeah. So 2-seam fastball, that's when he is a lot better and able to be better. So I'm just worried. Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about him. I think that I've always trusted Kenley, and I've been an Kenley apologist just as much as I've been a Kershaw apologist. But both of those guys have shown in the postseason now that they're not trustworthy. Just like Pedro Baez was not trustworthy in the postseason, except for last year.
Yeah.
There's certain guys that you just can't get back on. So I don't know. All right, I think that's going to do it. You good? I think we're good. I think we'll be back next week, Monday or Wednesday. We'll figure it out. It will either be Monday or Wednesday next week. We'll be back. It'll be a Blue Review every single week. Hoping to get this into podcast form at some point. It will be there. But once again, I am Greg Bergman, at Bergman Greg on Twitter and on Instagram. This is Matthew Moreno. You can find him at mmoreno1015, mmoreno1015. And don't forget to follow Dodger Blue for all of your Dodger news. DodgerBlue.com is where everything is. They have great stuff. They're always at every game and have post-game sound, pre-game sound, everything that you want. Great articles. Make sure to go check out DodgerBlue.com and also check out BleedLos.com for one of these great hats and shirts that they have out there. Thank you guys very much for being with the Blue Review. For Matt Moreno, I am Greg Bergman. I will see you guys next week. See you.